mean, I always come back to the fact that the censorship industry at the top level is not about Republican versus Democrat. It's not about liberal versus conservative. It's about the foreign policy establishment versus domestic populism. What you just said about the Ukraine situation is currently one of the existential battles playing out in the budget fight, which
Hmm.
is that the rise of these MAGA, right wing populist coalitions within through the Freedom Caucus and Mike Johnson's speakership and Jim Jordan and Dan Bishop and Thomas Massey and all these folks, the rise of this sort of critical component making up almost half of the GOP now in Congress that does not approve of foreign spending on this of U.S. taxpayer spending on this foreign war is existential to the execution of the policy itself in Ukraine. We spent $200 billion on this war already, and we're probably going to go into negotiations soon because we're losing. But we're going to need to keep the military spending high in order to have a leverage in those negotiations. And if the wrong people get elected, then in the eyes of the national security state and the blob, then that kills the entire policy, the ability to carry it all out. All these super fragile operations all go bust. And so they need to they need to stop the rise of populist parties. They need to stop the rise of parties who care more about the homeland than the empire.
Yeah.
And it's not just a political thing. They did this to Jeremy Corbyn in the UK because of his position on NATO. They tried to do it to Bernie Sanders in 2016 because he wanted less money for NATO and foreign intervention so that they could have left-wing universal health care and free education. But that would take money away from the blob too. So the problem is they're trying to make it so we can't elect our way out of their hegemony over management of our empire.
Yeah, so instead, we pay the price. You have to suffer. No speech for you, right? We have to censor you. Your ideas are dangerous. We don't want to hear from you. You're gonna because really all the money is foreign. I mean, like you mentioned, the United States is how many people? 330 million people. There's billions of people on the planet. That's where all the money is, and so they have to continue to make that money in a variety of different ways, be it energy, be it war, be it business deals, right, around the world. And they want to keep those going while Americans sit here and say, yeah, but what about us? And they say, yeah, but what about you? We've got money to make. And the money to make is all overseas. And so, because that's where all the people are, we're just a blip comparatively, population wise. Uh,
That's exactly it. And I think there was a time in the 20th century when our management of the empire did have some synchronicity with the welfare of the people, the citizens of the homeland, in the sense that our chamber of commerce, our all of our multinational blue chip companies, they depend exactly as you said, not just for the energy deals and for the 7 billion strong market, but even for things like our critical supply lines. I mean, everything from our oil and gas to our lithium and our cobalt, our rare earth minerals, to to our sugar, to agriculture. I mean, so much of this depends on plots of dirt that are in the empire rather than in the homeland. And the issue is you do need. It is a mean old world out there, and you do need a powerful statecraft mechanism in order to protect U.S. commercial interests internationally. And when we set up the CIA in 1947, George Kennan, the architect of that, published a memo in 1948 called "The Inauguration of Organized Political Warfare," calling for a Department of Dirty Tricks to be able to essentially overthrow governments whenever we needed to have that sort of ready-made capacity. And that is often invoked when there are governments that threaten a critical mass of U.S. business interests there. The banana wars are sort of a classic example of this in the late 1800s, early 1900s, when we were setting up little puppet governments in Latin America that were basically run by U.S. companies like United Fruit. That's where the Banana Republic term comes from. And then we put that strategy on steroids in the 20th century after the creation of the CIA and the Cold War doctrine gave us this sort of carte blanche. But the issue is I'm not sure I have a problem with that when it's done around the globe. Um, but the fact is now they've turned it inward. Now they're doing it to us, so they can't make the argument that this benefits the citizens of the homeland. They're treating us just like the citizens of any old country that whose government they want to topple. And the other part is when we do favors for the Chamber of Commerce, when we overthrow a government or we pipe in hundreds of millions of dollars to their civil society to sort of rig their political economy, oftentimes that no longer benefits the US. We have moved our manufacturing base out of the country. We have moved a substantial amount of our labor pool out of the country. And so, when it used to be the case that when we made the world an international market for big steel companies or big products and service companies in the US, that would be U.S. workers who are benefiting. That would be, that would allow them to buy a home. That would give them a pension. It would make them employed, and it would build up regionally, the heartland of our country. But that's now been carved out into a rust belt, and there seems to be no plan to build that back up. It's all been permanently exported, and countries that are rising right now, like China, are doing in the 21st century with their own domestic manufacturing miracle what we used to do. So the line has been broken. That umbilical cord that used to connect domestic interest to our management of the foreign empire. So now it just kind of feels like an occupation, frankly.
Right. It's all about money. I mean, that's what it seems to just all of this boils down to money. And there's different ways people make money on different types of industries. So it just kind of, like I said, that there's the war machine, right? And there's a ton of money in that. Then there's business, and there's a variety of there's energy. There's a variety of different ways that this money is made, but it's all made offshore because it's just more people, more land, greater population outside of America. I mean, this just really, I feel like if we could all, if people could wake up to the fact that we are basically in a kingdom again, that we're essentially living under monarchs, that they're just new kings have been crowned, and that these are these big, huge businesses that are. It's just when you go back to that era with kingdoms and dukes and right, that it was about money. They had land, they had agriculture, that they were protecting their interests. And so they would keep people down, and and you couldn't speak ill of the king. If you did, you might be beheaded or something. And they basically figured out a new way to create kings. It's just now it's rather than, how were kings crowned back then to begin with? It's not like people are born, yes, of course there's a lineage, but not really. I mean, you have to say one day, I'm a king, and now these are my people, and this is my kingdom, and I'm in charge here. And it's now the same thing. It's just that this is done with the king makers are now the ones who make all the money, and they want to protect that money. They want to protect their fiefdoms, and so it's the same tactics. We just have switched out the names.
Well, Kim, it's so funny you say that because just a few weeks ago it came out that Larry Fink, the head of BlackRock, made a statement on TV that markets prefer autocracies to democracies because they're more stable.
Right.
It's just it's basically saying markets prefer monarchies
Right.
to and this is the head of BlackRock, who is got $10 trillion of assets under management and has a plurality control over basically every chamber of commerce company. So he's basically a one-man chamber of commerce who is saying the chamber of commerce prefers the monarchy that you just described.
Well, right, and you couldn't speak ill of the king for a reason. They're trying to keep that control, keep people from rising up and toppling the monarchy, and they're doing the same exact tactics today. I think when we read those history book stories, we look back and we say that was wrong, right? We don't want to live like this. Yet we are living it like that. We've just swapped out the names and the players a bit, so it's not as recognizable, but it is really truly the exact same thing. I mean, we are the peasants that are being told what we can and cannot say by the government, by the kings, because they don't want us to infringe on their money making and their wealth and the power that they hold. But if you read the history books, those don't last. People do eventually rise up, and they do
Right.
eventually topple the king. It's just a matter of time when they wake up and they realize this isn't actually for my benefit. I mean, for many, many decades and hundreds of years, centuries, people living under those types of monarchs would think, well, this is for our own good. Our king protects us. This is how this is good for us. This is how society is. And they don't know any different. And so they would just go along with that. But eventually people stop going along with it when they realize this isn't really for my benefit. And we just haven't hit that point yet because it's, like I said, it's not as recognizable, right? Because it's different. It's the Mark Zuckerberg.
Right.
And then they've got control over our government, who clearly isn't really in charge. I mean, the government is completely bought off by all of these various different interests. So, I mean, we have to wake up to this so that we can then topple it in a way, peacefully. But nonetheless, when we but they don't want us to wake up to it, and that's why they're censoring us. I think the
Yeah.
big question then is, what can we even do about this? The tricky thing is the European stuff. That to me is highly alarming because most governments around the world do not have First Amendment rights. All of these tech companies want to be global. I mean, the thing I would do, but then it would be like socialism, I suppose, or it'd be like communism, I suppose, is I would be like, you can't, if you want to be an American company, then you got to be an American company. And you got to be doing business in America, benefiting Americans, manufacturing in America. And I think that's kind of the America first attitude has been bring everything back, bring
Right.
everything home,
Yeah.
stop selling off our land to China or Chinese companies, our single family homes to Chinese companies, stop like allowing our foreign policy to be controlled by other countries, like so bring it all home. But when you really start to get into that idea of bringing it all home, which is interestingly mostly talked about by people on the right, people who voted Republican their whole lives. But when you start talking that way, it's almost like nationalism.
Yeah.
It's like nationalizing resources. And
Right.
then you start getting into almost socialism or communism with
Right.
those ideas.
Right.
So it's tricky.
No, it is. It definitely is. I mean, in terms of what to do about it, to use the monarchy example, probably the most subversive character in the king's court is the jester, and the power of humor and staying light and staying chatty on these things cannot be understated. I mean, I can't tell you how many NATO white papers I've read on the need to stop the rise of subversive humor online because that is used to sort of evade, for the virus to slip through the cell membranes, organic defenses. It's one of the reasons that sites like the Babylon Bee were targeted. And
That's why you got to
there's,
silence Joe Rogan, that comedian.
yeah, yeah, and um, even the intelligence agencies are aware of this. There was a UK Foreign Office created NATO-backed clandestine black ops operation called the Integrity Initiative from 2015 to 2018, which created all these influence cluster cells within NATO countries, aggregating their journalists and their government officials and regulators and business folks, and to create a basically one of the very first uh, transatlantic censorship operations across NATO. This was right after the Crimea annexation in 2014 when they declared the tanks to tweets doctrine, and they set up these cells to basically enforce this. And when cluster cell members were recruited into this, by the way, these documents are all online, or you can just search my Twitter handle at Mike Ben Cyber and just put in Integrity Initiative, and you'll see all these documents. They're incredible. And in the introductory materials that they handed out to people, and by the way, they told people to be helpfully uninformative about the sources of funding for this and make sure people are tightly vetted before they're recruited into these intercluster cells. But then, the actual basically syllabus document that they're given day one has a whole compendium on why NATO is losing the meme war, and the use of humor online by these populist groups, and the need to sort of police that, and then also sort of try to simulate what they're doing. Then they created NAFO, this sort of play on kind of like a Pepe army. But the fact is the best thing anybody can do is just talk about this, with their family, their friends, and don't underestimate the snowball effect of one small voice talking to one small voice. oftentimes it's not until it's in the air and on tip of everybody's tongue that that opportunities arise that you can't even anticipate beforehand. The fact that Elon Musk bought X, was a Deus ex machina. You can't you can't predict something like that happening. But you can be in ready position. When the Disinformation Governance Board disaster happened for the censorship industry in April 2022, fortunately, if the work had not been done to around the extent and expanse of the censorship industry before that, to be able to sort of take advantage of that, to be able to educate people about how much deeper things went, we would not have had the rolling congressional investigations that we've had from House Oversight, Weaponization, and the House Homeland Security Committee. You've had multiple lawsuits that have been brought because of this. Much of my work has been built on other people educating me through one small voice type thing online, and that's allowed me as a speaker and a publisher to be able to publish a lot of the reports that form the foundation of the Missouri v. Biden Supreme Court case and the America First legal case, these multiple congressional investigations and the Twitter files. So it all starts with opening your mouth and being a little bit more chatty and talkative than you should, and trying to stay light and funny. Sorry, while you're at it.
Kind of the opposite of what they want us to do. They want to censor us, and the answer is to talk more. Don't be silenced, talk more. And it does work because, yeah, like the Ministry of Misinformation, when they tried to install that didn't work. People rose up and said, wait a minute, we don't want that. We know about this. We don't like this. You're going to shut that down right away. And of course, then they get sneaky, and then we have to keep our eyes open and look for their little sneaky ways that they try to do these types of things, like go around to the Europeans and say, well, you do it. If you do it, then it'll happen because we share all the same tech. Mike, very interesting and alarming. And this is one of, I think, the biggest fights of our time is censorship. This is how we stay free. It comes down to being able to continue our free speech, being able to continue talking. That is the foundation for freedom, which interestingly is the name of your organization, Foundation for Freedom Online. What can people do to help? Like, is there anything that people can do besides, you've said keep talking. Is there anything people could do for your foundation or?
Well, what I would say is, I'm highly active on X/Twitter. My handle's at Mike Benz Cyber. I publish about these issues every day. I make short form, long form, medium form video, 5, 6 times a week. I'm constantly publishing the sort of source documents and receipts and clips that are all highly shareable in order to persuade friends and family about what we're up against and what can be done. But this censorship industry was started by a whole of society mobilization from the blob to stop everyday average Americans. As I see it, the task now is to create and consolidate a whole of society force for freedom, one that ties together our allies in government, our allies in the private sector, our allies in the civil society, the NGOs and foundations and nonprofits, and our allies in the news media space to create this whole of society effort to protect us against the whole of society effort to persecute us.
Yeah, I'm a big free speech absolutist. So I even ideas I completely find abhorrent. I think they should be able to be said. For one, I like to know what, okay, then I'd avoid that person, or, I'd rather know than not know what people really think. I think that the way to combat bad ideas is continuing to talk about good ideas, right? I'm a real strong believer in that. And I would like to continue to live in a society that also values that. But it seems increasingly like people are valuing it less and less. They would rather shun ideas. And that's one of the problems, is that the people are often on board with what the government's wanting to do because they don't like certain things that are being said, and they want to silence those opinions. They want to silence those opposition to a variety of things, thinking that it's dangerous or that it's wrong or that it's hateful or whatever their reasoning is for wanting to silence people. And I say, we have to hear it all in order to have the discussions and to talk. And but yeah, I think this is the biggest fight of our time right now
Me too.
is the ability to speak freely. So thank you so much, Mike, for being here and educating us more on this. I learned a lot, really, just even from the beginning of, well, they started with ISIS, and of course, they start with the one thing everybody agrees on,
Exactly.
because
Exactly.
nobody wants ISIS in the United
Right.
States, nobody.
Yeah.
And then it just morphs and morphs and morphs into this, and then they're targeting all of us. And so it's really important that we stay informed. And thank you for the work that you're doing, Mike. So thank you for being here.
Well, thank you, Kim. Thanks for your work and for this conversation.